Cowboy found a dying Apache woman.
wake
She
up, we
rose
gotta
again
move.
as his fierce love. Wild West story. Jack, a lone cowboy, urged his tired horse forward, the soft creaking of the saddle and the rhythmic clopping of hooves filling the quiet air. He had been riding all day, following a narrow trail that twisted through the arid landscape, past scattered shrubs and jagged rocks. Jack had grown used to the silence of the Wild West. It was his companion, just as much as the horse beneath him. The wind carried whispers of the vast emptiness around him, and he felt both freedom and loneliness at the same time. Jack was not a man who sought company. Life on the frontier had taught him to rely on himself. His eyes, sharp and careful, scanned every detail of the land. Every movement of a bird, every rustle in the grass, every distant echo was important in these wild plains. But on this particular evening, as the sky turned a deep orange and purple, something unusual caught his eye. There, near the twisted branches of a mesquite tree, lay a figure motionless on the ground. At first, Jack thought it might be a fallen animal, perhaps a coyote or a deer. But as he rode closer, his heart skipped a beat. It was a young woman, barely conscious, her body thin and covered in dirt and blood. Her hair was tangled and her clothes were torn and stained. She seemed small, fragile, almost like she could disappear into the desert dust. Yet even in her weakened state, there was a strength about her, a quiet defiance in the way her chest moved with shallow breaths. Jack felt a mix of fear and concern. He had grown up in a world where settlers and native tribes often clashed, and the Apache were both feared and respected for their courage and survival skills. He had heard stories of battles, of villages destroyed, and of warriors who would rather die than surrender. And yet here was a woman, clearly in need of help, lying helplessly before him. His instincts as a man and as a human being overrode any fear. Carefully, he dismounted, keeping his horse close. The woman stirred slightly, moaning softly. Jack approached her slowly, making sure not to startle her. "Hey, can you hear me?" he asked gently. She blinked weakly, her dark eyes clouded with pain and confusion. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Jack realized she might be too weak to speak. He looked around. There was no one else in sight. The sun was setting and the air was growing colder with each passing minute. He had to act quickly. Jack knelt beside her, feeling her pulse, which was weak but steady. Her breathing was shallow, almost like a whisper against the wind. Without hesitation, he lifted her carefully, supporting her under the shoulders and knees. His arms trembled slightly under her weight, but he didn't falter. The ride back was slow and careful. Jack wrapped her in a worn blanket he kept under his saddle, trying to shield her from the cold desert air. He whispered soothing words as he rode, though he doubted she could understand them. "Hold on, you'll be safe," he said softly. The horse seemed to sense the urgency and moved steadily, navigating the uneven terrain as if it, too, understood the gravity of the moment. As they reached the small cabin that Jack had inherited from his father, he felt a flicker of hope. The cabin was modest, with wooden walls and a roof patched from years of storms. But it was a safe place, away from prying eyes and dangerous encounters. Jack gently carried the woman inside, laying her on a bed of clean blankets he had quickly prepared. The faint light of the setting sun filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room. Jack moved quickly, fetching water in a small tin cup and dampening a cloth to clean her wounds. They were many, scratches, bruises, and deep gashes that suggested she had been in a violent encounter. Her hands were scratched and swollen, and her legs bore the marks of a desperate journey through the rugged terrain. Jack worked carefully, speaking in soft tones, hoping to calm her without startling her. "You're going to be okay," he murmured, more to reassure himself than her. "Just stay with me." Hours passed and the woman remained mostly unconscious, drifting in and out of awareness. Occasionally she would groan or mumble words in her own language. Apache, Jack recognized, though he didn't understand the meaning. Still, he listened closely, hoping to catch a name or a clue about who she was. When her eyes opened briefly, they were filled with fear and caution, but there was also a flicker of recognition, as if she understood she was not in danger here. Jack sat by her side through the long night, tending to her injuries and keeping a fire burning in the small stove. The wind howled outside, carrying with it the sounds of the open plains, the distant cries of coyotes, the rustle of dry leaves, and the occasional shout of a night bird. Inside, the cabin was warm and quiet, a small haven against the vast, unforgiving wilderness. As he watched her sleep, Jack thought about the world they both came from. He thought of the violence, the endless struggles for survival, and the loneliness that the frontier brought. He thought of her bravery, lying there so vulnerable yet alive. And he thought of his own life, which had been marked by solitude and hard work, without companionship or purpose beyond survival. Something about this woman stirred a feeling he hadn't felt in years, a mixture of responsibility, admiration, and an almost instinctive desire to protect her. By morning, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the cabin window. The woman stirred again, her eyes opening slowly. She looked around, confusion and fear flickering across her face. Jack offered her a smile, gentle and reassuring, as he handed her a cup of water. She drank slowly, her hands trembling, but she drank. For the first time, Jack saw a small spark of life return to her eyes, a hint of determination hidden beneath the pain. He realized that saving her would be more than just tending her wounds. It would take patience, understanding, and respect. She was proud, fierce, and wary of outsiders. He could see it in her eyes, a spirit that refused to be broken, even in the face of despair. And Jack knew that this was only the beginning. Their journey had just begun, not just through the wilderness, but through trust, healing, and the unspoken bond that was already beginning to form between them. As the day unfolded, Jack worked quietly, preparing simple meals and ensuring she had a place to rest. He stayed nearby, giving her space when she needed it, yet ready to help at a moment's notice. Each small gesture, offering water, cleaning a wound, or simply sitting in silence, was a step toward earning her trust. He understood that this was not a story of a man rescuing a woman. It was a story of survival, respect, and the fragile beginnings of a connection that could change both their lives. By the end of the day, she was able to sit up on her own, supported by Jack's careful guidance. She looked out the window at the vast expanse of the plains, her dark eyes reflecting both fear and awe. Jack watched quietly, sensing that beneath her fragile exterior lay a spirit that would not be easily tamed. She was a survivor, and she had chosen to live. And he, for the first time in many lonely years, realized that perhaps he had also found something to live for, not just in protecting her, but in understanding her, sharing moments of silence, and witnessing the strength that had carried her through unimaginable hardships. As the sun set once more, casting golden hues across the cabin and the plains beyond, Jack and the woman shared a quiet understanding. Words were few, but trust was beginning to grow. The journey ahead would be difficult, full of unknowns and challenges, but the first step had been taken. A dying woman had been found, and in the process, a lonely cowboy had found a purpose he had never known. And in the quiet of that Wild West evening, a bond was forming, a bond that neither time nor distance could easily break. The morning after Jack had found Kaya, the young Apache woman, brought a fragile calm over the small cabin. The sun rose slowly, casting warm golden rays across the dusty plains outside. Jack moved quietly around the cabin, careful not to disturb her. Kaya was resting, her body still weak, but there was a subtle change in her breathing, a hint that life was returning to her fragile frame. Her dark hair was tangled across her forehead, and bruises still marked her arms and legs, but the sparkle in her eyes, however faint, told Jack she was fighting to survive. He knew that healing her wounds physically was only one part of the struggle. The emotional pain, the fear, and the trauma she carried would not be as easy to mend. Jack had seen enough in his life to understand that. He remembered the stories of families torn apart, of people left to survive alone in the wilderness. He knew the strength it took to continue living after such experiences, and he realized that Kaya was one of those rare souls who had survived against incredible odds. Jack prepared a simple breakfast: warm water, a little bread, and some dried meat he had stored. He brought it to her carefully, placing the plate on the blanket beside her. Kaya stirred awake slowly, blinking against the morning light. Her movements were hesitant, cautious, as though she were unsure whether she could trust this man who had found her. Jack knelt beside her, offering a gentle smile. "You need to eat," he said softly. "It will help you get your strength back." For a moment she looked at him with guarded eyes, but hunger and weakness soon overcame caution. She took the food carefully, her hands trembling slightly. Jack watched, giving her time and space, resisting the urge to rush her. Every small gesture mattered. Every moment of trust was a victory. After breakfast, Jack helped Kaya sit up and then gently guided her to a chair by the window. The view outside was vast and endless: rolling plains, distant mountains, and the dusty trail that had brought Jack to her. She looked out quietly, taking in the scenery, as if memorizing every detail. Jack noticed a flicker of curiosity in her eyes, a reminder that despite her suffering, she was still very much alive and alert. "You're safe here," Jack said, his voice calm but firm. "No one will hurt you." Kaya's dark eyes met his briefly, and she nodded slightly, though still cautious. Jack understood that words alone could not heal her. Trust had to be earned, and he was ready to give her all the time she needed. The following days were a delicate balance of care and patience. Jack cleaned her wounds daily, applied ointments, and dressed them carefully. He gathered herbs and other simple remedies from the nearby wilderness, using the skills he had learned from his father. Each touch was careful, measured, showing respect for her body and her strength. Kaya responded quietly, allowing him to help without resistance, though she never let her guard completely down. Jack also tried to communicate, learning fragments of her language and listening intently when she spoke. Kaya, despite her injuries, was strong-willed. She refused to be seen as weak or helpless. Slowly, in small gestures and brief exchanges, she began to share her story. Her village had been attacked while she was away gathering food. She had escaped, but not without injury, and had wandered alone through the desert for days. Jack listened in silence, letting her words sink in. The pain in her story mirrored the struggles of the land they both lived in, harsh, unforgiving, but filled with resilience. As Kaya regained some strength, Jack began to teach her how to move carefully again, how to stand without pain, how to walk steadily over uneven ground. He watched with admiration as she pushed herself, refusing to give in to weakness. Each small step was a victory, not just over her injuries but over the fear that had haunted her since the attack. Jack realized that Kaya's survival depended not only on medicine, but on courage, determination, and willpower, the very qualities she had in abundance. The nights were long and quiet, filled with the sounds of the wilderness outside the cabin. Jack kept a fire burning, its warm glow comforting in the cool desert air. Kaya would lie awake sometimes, staring at the ceiling or the flickering shadows on the walls. Jack respected her silence, never forcing conversation. Instead, he offered his presence, sitting nearby, ready to assist, to comfort, or simply to be a steady companion in the darkness. Slowly, a bond began to form between them, a silent understanding that neither had to speak to feel connection. One evening, as the wind whistled outside and the fire crackled in the stove, Kaya attempted to speak more clearly. Her words were halting, broken by her accent and weakness, but Jack could understand enough to catch fragments. She spoke of her people, her family, and the traditions that had shaped her. Jack listened intently, fascinated by the glimpses of a world he had never known. It was a culture rich in courage, wisdom, and respect for the land, qualities that Jack had long admired but never experienced firsthand. Through these conversations, Jack began to see Kaya not just as a wounded woman, but as a remarkable individual with an unbreakable spirit. Her determination, even in the face of pain and fear, inspired him. He realized that helping her survive was not simply an act of compassion, it was a privilege. He felt honored to witness her resilience, to share small moments of trust, and to be part of her journey back to life. As the weeks passed, Kaya's recovery continued. She learned to walk without support, to feed herself, and even to ride Jack's horse again. Each day she grew stronger, and each day the bond between them deepened. There was still caution, still a quiet tension born of past trauma, but there was also respect and quiet admiration. Jack marveled at her courage, while Kaya began to see that Jack was more than just a kind stranger. He was someone she could trust, someone who would not exploit her vulnerability, someone who respected her independence. One afternoon, Jack took her outside to the small garden he had started near the cabin. The desert was harsh, but he had managed to grow a few vegetables and herbs. Kaya helped him tend the plants, her hands careful but determined. She spoke little, but her eyes shone with focus and a hint of curiosity. Jack noticed the subtle changes in her demeanor, the way she smiled faintly when a seed sprouted, the way she laughed quietly when a small bird landed nearby. These moments, simple and ordinary to others, were victories in themselves. They marked the reclaiming of life, joy, and trust that had been nearly lost. At night, as they sat by the fire, Kaya began to relax more in Jack's presence. She still had moments of fear and pain, but she also began to show flashes of her personality, her humor, her curiosity, and her fiery spirit. Jack found himself drawn not just to her beauty, but to her strength, intelligence, and resilience. He understood that this was not a story of dependency, but of mutual respect. He had helped her survive, but in turn, she had inspired him, challenged him, and touched his life in ways he had never expected. Through the long days and quiet nights, Jack and Kaya built a routine that balanced care, recovery, and small joys. They hunted together, gathered herbs, and explored the immediate area around the cabin. Each activity, though simple, was a test of trust and cooperation. Jack noticed how Kaya's confidence returned with every passing day, how her movements became more assured, and how her laughter began to echo softly through the cabin. It was a slow, steady journey, but each step mattered. By the end of the second week, Kaya was walking without assistance, tending to herself, and even helping Jack with chores around the cabin. There was still pain, still memories of the attack that haunted her, but her spirit had begun to rise again. She was no longer just the injured woman Jack had found beneath the mesquite tree. She was becoming a partner, an equal in strength and determination. Jack watched her quietly one evening as the sun set over the plains. Her silhouette was strong and proud against the golden sky. He realized that the journey ahead would be long, full of challenges, but he also knew that Kaya had already proven her courage and resilience. She had survived against impossible odds, and she had begun to reclaim her life, step by step, day by day. In that quiet moment, Jack felt a profound respect and admiration for her. He knew that this was only the beginning of their story, one filled with trust, healing, and the slow but certain growth of connection, and perhaps something even deeper. Kaya had risen from the brink of death, and in the process, she had begun to inspire life, hope, and a bond that neither of them could have anticipated. The days grew longer and warmer as spring stretched across the Wild West plains. Jack and Kaya had settled into a quiet routine, a rhythm that combined recovery, survival, and small joys that made life meaningful. Kaya was no longer the fragile, wounded woman Jack had found beneath the mesquite tree. She was regaining her strength, and with it, her fierce spirit and determination. Every movement she made showed both confidence and grace, a reflection of the resilience that had kept her alive in the harsh wilderness. Jack noticed the changes with admiration. Each morning, Kaya would rise early, her eyes clear and alert, and move about the cabin with energy and purpose. She helped him with chores, collecting water from the nearby stream, tending the small garden and preparing simple meals. She moved with a quiet grace, careful but confident, her body now recovering from the deep injuries that had once threatened her life. Jack found himself silently cheering her on, proud of every small victory she achieved. Kaya, however, remained wary. Though she was recovering physically, the emotional scars of her past were still fresh. Her village had been attacked, her people scattered, and she had survived on sheer instinct alone. She had learned early in life to trust her senses over her heart, to rely on courage rather than kindness, because in the Wild West, danger was never far. And yet, Jack's steady presence began to chip away at her walls. He was patient, gentle, and never demanding. He never treated her as weak or helpless. Slowly, she began to let herself feel something she had not felt in a long time: safety, and perhaps even trust. Jack and Kaya began to spend more time outside, exploring the land around the cabin. Jack taught her to ride his horse again, starting with short trips through the nearby plains and gradually moving to longer rides. At first, Kaya's movements were cautious, her hands gripping the reins tightly, her posture stiff. But Jack stayed close, offering guidance and encouragement, never forcing her, never rushing her. Gradually, her confidence returned. Her horse moved smoothly beneath her as she learned to trust both the animal and her own instincts. Jack watched with quiet pride, marveling at her determination and skill. During these excursions, they discovered small wonders of the wilderness together. Kaya pointed out edible plants, hidden water sources, and tracks left by animals in the soft soil. She spoke in her language sometimes, and Jack listened carefully, learning new words and the meaning behind them. These moments became lessons, not just in survival, but in understanding each other and the world around them. Jack realized that Kaya's knowledge of the land was extraordinary. She had grown up learning to read the signs of nature, to survive where others might falter, and now she was teaching him in subtle ways that inspired both respect and admiration. At night, the cabin was filled with quiet conversations, laughter, and shared stories. Kaya began to open up, telling Jack about her childhood, her family, and the traditions of her people. She spoke of hunting, gathering, and the spiritual connection her tribe had with the land. Jack listened in awe, fascinated by the richness of her experiences and the strength it had instilled in her. She was fearless in ways he had never known, and he admired her not just for surviving, but for the wisdom and courage that came from living fully in a harsh world. Their bond grew stronger, not through words alone, but through shared experiences and mutual respect. Jack admired Kaya's strength, her determination, and her unwillingness to give in to fear. Kaya, in turn, saw that Jack was more than just a protector. He was patient, kind, and unwavering. She began to test his patience and judgment, not in anger, but to see if he could match her courage and stand firm when faced with challenges. Jack met each test with quiet confidence, proving that he was trustworthy and dependable, and slowly she allowed herself to rely on him. One afternoon, while exploring a nearby canyon, Jack and Kaya encountered a small herd of deer. Jack motioned for Kaya to stay quiet as he prepared his rifle. She crouched beside him, her eyes sharp and focused. Jack was impressed at how quickly she adapted to the situation, moving silently, reading the signs of the terrain, and understanding the behavior of the animals. Together they hunted, sharing the meal afterward with a sense of accomplishment and teamwork. These experiences, small as they might seem, built a foundation of trust and cooperation between them. Despite their growing connection, Kaya never lost her fierce independence. She insisted on doing tasks herself, refusing to be treated as someone who needed constant protection. Jack admired this about her deeply. Her courage was not reckless but measured, born from experience and survival. She had faced unimaginable hardship and emerged stronger, more determined than ever. Jack realized that their relationship was evolving naturally, built on mutual respect, admiration, and a shared understanding of the challenges life had thrown at them. As Kaya regained her strength, she also began to explore the emotional aspects of their bond. She noticed Jack's quiet attention to detail, his thoughtfulness, and the way he always made sure she was safe and comfortable. She began to appreciate the little gestures, a blanket tucked around her shoulders, a fresh meal prepared just for her, or the patient guidance as she learned to ride again. These acts of care were not grand or dramatic, but they carried a quiet power, showing her that he valued her as an equal, not a burden. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the plains, Kaya and Jack sat by the fire outside the cabin. Kaya picked up a small stick and began drawing shapes in the dirt, telling Jack stories of her childhood, her family, and the elders of her tribe. Jack listened carefully, fascinated by her words and the way she expressed herself. He began to understand that her fierce exterior was a protective shield, one that had kept her alive, but also prevented her from fully trusting others. And he realized that helping her heal was about more than tending wounds. It was about patience, understanding, and earning her trust day by day. The days turned into weeks, and Kaya's transformation became more visible. She moved with confidence, spoke with clarity, and laughed more freely. Her presence brought warmth and energy to the cabin, and Jack found himself smiling more than he had in years. Their partnership, once born of necessity, was growing into something deeper, a shared respect, a connection forged through hardship, and a bond strengthened by their mutual reliance on each other. Jack also noticed changes in his own heart. He had spent so many years alone, relying only on himself, but Kaya's presence brought a new dimension to his life. He felt protective, not out of duty, but out of genuine care. He admired her courage and spirit, and he found himself thinking about her constantly. The connection they shared was no longer simply about survival. It was about companionship, trust, and the subtle beginnings of love, though neither would name it aloud yet. Kaya, too, began to recognize the depth of her feelings. She saw in Jack not just a man who had saved her life, but someone who understood her strength, respected her independence, and valued her as an equal. She felt safe with him, yet challenged, inspired, and encouraged to reclaim her life fully. For the first time since the attack on her village, she allowed herself to hope, to smile without fear, and to imagine a future that was not defined by survival alone. Together they faced challenges in the wilderness, harsh weather, wild animals, and the unpredictable dangers of frontier life. Each obstacle strengthened their bond. They learned to rely on each other's skills and instincts, to communicate without words, and to anticipate each other's actions. Their connection was not born of romance alone, but of shared experience, respect, and a deep understanding of each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. By the end of this period, Kaya was no longer the woman Jack had first found, lying weak and near death beneath a tree. She had risen, strong and independent, her spirit as fierce as ever. And Jack had grown alongside her, learning patience, empathy, and the quiet power of partnership. Their relationship had evolved into a delicate balance of trust, respect, and unspoken affection, a bond that would only grow stronger in the days to come. As the sun set behind the distant hills one evening, painting the plains in shades of red and gold, Jack and Kaya sat together on a small rise overlooking the land. Kaya's eyes sparkled with renewed life, and Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration. They had both survived, learned, and grown together. Their story was no longer just about survival. It was about rising stronger, reclaiming life, and building a connection that neither time nor hardship could break. In that quiet moment, with the wind rustling through the grasses and the world stretched endlessly before them, Jack realized that Kaya had not only survived, she had thrived. And he too had changed, finding purpose, companionship, and a deep respect for the woman who had faced death and emerged stronger than ever. The journey ahead would be full of challenges, but Tojdurthi were ready to face whatever the Wild West had in store. The seasons were shifting, and the Wild West plains had begun to bloom with life. Birds filled the sky with their songs, and the wind carried the scent of fresh earth and wildflowers across the wide-open landscape. Jack and Kaya had grown closer during these weeks, not through words alone, but through shared experiences, mutual respect, and quiet companionship. Kaya's strength had returned fully, and she moved with a confidence and grace that matched her fierce spirit. Jack, too, had changed. His life, once lonely and routine, was now full of purpose, care, and admiration for the woman who had risen from near death to stand beside him. Their days were filled with activity and adventure. Jack and Kaya rode through the open plains, their horses moving in tandem, their movements synchronized in a way that reflected trust and understanding. Kaya's laughter echoed across the fields, light and clear, as she tested her horse's speed and agility. Jack could not help but smile, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not experienced in years. He was captivated not only by her beauty, but by her courage, determination, and unwavering spirit. She had survived unimaginable hardships, and yet she faced each day with energy and curiosity. Kaya, for her part, had begun to allow herself to feel more than just survival. She noticed Jack's quiet attentions, the way he made sure she was comfortable, the gentle encouragement when she attempted something difficult, the small gestures that showed his care without being intrusive. She realized that she could rely on him, not out of weakness, but because he respected her independence and treated her as an equal. For the first time since the attack on her village, she allowed herself to relax and enjoy the companionship of someone who truly understood her. One afternoon, while riding along the banks of a winding river, they stumbled upon a small band of travelers who had become stranded. Their wagon wheel had broken, and they were struggling to carry their supplies through the mud. Jack and Kaya immediately offered their help, lifting heavy sacks, guiding the wagon, and ensuring that the travelers were safe. Kaya moved with incredible efficiency and strength, her confidence evident in every action. She gave instructions with authority, helping Jack coordinate the effort, and the travelers looked on with surprise and admiration. Jack felt a surge of pride. The woman who had once been too weak to stand was now strong, capable, and unafraid to lead. These shared experiences strengthened the bond between them. Trust had become the foundation of their relationship, and from trust grew affection. Jack found himself thinking about Kaya constantly, wondering how she had endured so much pain and survived. He admired her courage and spirit, and he felt a growing sense of love, not the shallow, fleeting kind, but a deep, abiding connection born of shared trials, respect, and understanding. Kaya, in turn, began to feel the same way. She saw in Jack a man who valued her strength, who respected her independence, and who had been by her side when she needed him most. As the days turned into weeks, Jack and Kaya began to rely on each other for more than survival. They shared stories of their pasts, dreams for the future, and quiet moments of reflection as they watched the sun rise and set over the plains. Their conversations were filled with laughter, teasing, and gentle arguments, but always underlined by mutual respect. Jack admired Kaya's knowledge of the land, her intelligence, and her sharp instincts. Kaya appreciated Jack's steadiness, his patience, and the quiet confidence that made him reliable in every situation. One evening, as they camped near a small grove of trees, Kaya spoke softly about her childhood and the family she had lost. Her voice trembled slightly, but Jack listened without interruption, offering silent support. He knew that words alone could not erase the pain she carried, but his presence gave her comfort. She realized that she could share her burdens with him, that she did not have to carry them alone. And in that moment, their bond deepened, not just as companions or partners in survival, but as two souls who had found understanding and solace in each other. Their connection was tested in many ways. The Wild West was unforgiving, and danger was never far. Bandits roamed the plains, storms could appear without warning, and wild animals threatened travelers. Yet, Jack and Kaya faced these challenges together, combining their skills and instincts to overcome each obstacle. Each time they succeeded, their trust in one another grew stronger. They communicated without words, anticipating each other's needs and movements, creating a partnership that was unshakable. Kaya's fierce spirit became evident in every action she took. She was not content to be a passive companion. She faced challenges head-on, whether hunting for food, navigating difficult terrain, or protecting herself and Jack from danger. Her courage inspired Jack, and he found himself relying on her not just for help, but for guidance and insight. Together, they became a formidable pair, each complementing the other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. Their relationship was no longer defined by who saved whom. It was a partnership in every sense of the word. As the days passed, their affection began to shift into love. It was subtle at first, a lingering glance, a touch that lasted a moment longer than necessary, a shared smile over a small joke. Jack noticed the way Kaya's eyes softened when she looked at him, the way she moved closer when they sat by the fire, and the quiet moments when she seemed content just to be near him. Kaya, too, felt the stirring of emotions she had long suppressed, feelings of safety, admiration, and desire. She realized that she cared for Jack deeply, not because he had saved her, but because he was kind, steady, and brave. One morning, as they rode through a canyon bathed in golden sunlight, Jack reached out instinctively, taking Kaya's hand. She looked at him, startled for a moment but did not pull away. The warmth of his touch, the reassurance in his grip, and the trust they had built over weeks of shared experience created a moment of connection that neither would forget. It was not a dramatic gesture, but a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had grown between them, a bond that was now becoming something more profound than companionship or friendship. Their love was fierce, much like Kaya herself. It was passionate, full of respect and unyielding. It was not a love born of convenience or circumstance, but of shared struggle, mutual admiration and understanding. Jack admired Kaya's strength, and Kaya cherished Jack's steadiness. Together, they faced the challenges of the Wild West not as two individuals, but as a united pair, each drawing strength from the other. Even in moments of quiet solitude, their connection was palpable. They would sit together by the river, watch the sun set over the mountains, or tend to the cabin and the small garden. They shared laughter, stories, and dreams, but also silence, comfortable, understanding silence that spoke volumes. Their relationship was evolving naturally, a balance of love, respect, and shared life experiences. Yet, despite their growing closeness, there was no rush. Both understood the fragility of life in the Wild West. Danger could appear at any moment, and they had both witnessed loss and suffering. This awareness made their love deeper, grounded not in passion alone, but in trust, shared experience, and a commitment to face life together. Kaya knew that Jack would stand by her no matter what, and Jack knew the same of her. One night, as a gentle wind swept across the plains, they sat by the fire outside the cabin. Kaya rested her head on Jack's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. They watched the stars appear in the sky, each one bright and clear against the dark velvet of night. Jack felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. He had found not just a companion but a partner, a fierce and courageous woman who had survived against all odds and now stood beside him. Kaya felt the same, a man who respected her strength, admired her courage, and loved her for who she truly was. In that quiet moment, Jack and Kaya realized that their journey together had transformed them both. They had faced hardship, danger, and uncertainty, yet they had emerged stronger, united, and in love. Their bond was unbreakable, forged through shared experience, trust, and respect. The Wild West, harsh and unforgiving as it could be, had become a place of hope, growth, and love for them both. Their fierce love was no longer just an emotion, it was a force. It shaped their actions, guided their decisions, and gave them courage in the face of danger. Jack and Kaya knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as partners, as equals, and as two hearts bound by trust, respect, and an unshakable love. As the night deepened and the stars twinkled overhead, Jack and Kaya sat in silence, savoring the quiet strength of their connection. They had survived, grown, and found each other in a world that often seemed unforgiving. And in that moment, they both understood that their love, fierce and enduring, would carry them through whatever trials the Wild West had in store. The months had passed since Jack had first found Kaya beneath the mesquite tree, weak and barely alive. Now, the plains around their cabin were alive with the energy of spring and early summer. Birds sang from the treetops, the river flowed steadily with clear water, and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers across the open land. Jack and Kaya had grown together through hardship, trust, and love. The bond they shared had deepened into something rare and powerful, a connection that neither circumstance nor danger could easily break. Kaya had fully regained her strength, moving through the land with confidence and grace. She could hunt, gather, and navigate the wilderness with the same skill and awareness that had once allowed her to survive alone. Yet her strength was now shared with Jack, their partnership unshakable. They faced challenges as a team, their trust in each other unwavering. Jack had come to admire not only her courage, but also her wisdom, her sharp instincts, and the quiet authority that came from her experiences. And Kaya, in turn, had learned to rely on Jack, not because she was weak, but because he respected her, supported her, and loved her without reservation. Life in the Wild West remained unpredictable. Bandits roamed the plains, sudden storms could appear, and wild animals sometimes threatened travelers. Yet, Jack and Kaya faced each obstacle with determination and courage, leaning on each other's strengths. One day, as they rode through a narrow canyon, they encountered a small group of cattle rustlers trying to steal livestock from nearby settlers. Jack acted quickly, signaling Kaya to flank them from the other side. She moved with precision and skill, her movements swift and confident. Together, they confronted the rustlers, their combined presence commanding and fearless. The rustlers, surprised by the pair's coordination and determination, retreated into the hills. Jack and Kaya had once again proven that their partnership was not just about survival, it was about strength, respect, and unity. Even in quieter moments, their connection was evident. They shared mornings by the river, washing clothes, preparing simple meals, and talking quietly about the land, the skies, and the small joys of life. Jack had started to cultivate a small garden near the cabin, growing vegetables, herbs, and a few fruits. Kaya worked alongside him, her hands gentle but capable, teaching him which plants were edible and how to care for the soil. These small, everyday tasks became symbols of life, growth, and hope. They reminded both of them that even in the harshness of the Wild West, beauty, life, and love could thrive. Kaya often spoke of her past, sharing memories of her family, her tribe, and the traditions that had shaped her. Jack listened carefully, fascinated by her stories and the lessons embedded within them. He began to understand not just her courage, but the depth of her wisdom and the richness of her culture. In turn, Jack shared tales of his life on the frontier, the challenges he had faced alone, and the dreams he had once thought impossible to achieve. They exchanged knowledge, respect, and understanding, building a foundation that went beyond physical survival. Their love had become fierce, strong, and enduring. It was visible in the small gestures, a hand held in silence, a smile shared over a shared joke, or a comforting presence during moments of fear or doubt. But it was also evident in the way they faced danger together, how they protected each other, and how they relied on one another for guidance, strength, and reassurance. The love they shared was not fragile or fleeting. It was a force that grounded them, strengthened them, and inspired them to live fully in a world that was often unforgiving. One day, Jack and Kaya rode into a nearby settlement to trade supplies. As they walked through the dusty streets, locals noticed the pair together, the cowboy and the fierce Apache woman. Whispers spread quickly. Some were skeptical, given the tensions between settlers and native tribes, but many admired the strength and unity of the couple. Jack and Kaya paid little attention to the opinions of others. Their trust and love for each other were more important than public perception. Yet their presence quietly challenged prejudice, showing that respect, courage, and love could bridge the gaps that division had once created. Back at the cabin, life continued with a steady rhythm. Kaya taught Jack to read the signs of the land more deeply, how to predict the weather, track animals, and understand the behavior of plants and wildlife. Jack, in turn, showed Kaya techniques for building structures, preserving food, and defending themselves if danger arose. Together, they created a life that was both safe and fulfilling, one that blended independence with interdependence, survival with joy, and strength with tenderness. As the sun dipped low in the sky one evening, Jack and Kaya sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the plains stretch endlessly before them. Kaya rested her head on Jack's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Jack wrapped his arm around her, holding her gently, yet protectively. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding and shared history. They had faced hardship, fear, and uncertainty together, and now they were stronger for it, their love a constant in the unpredictable world around them. Kaya spoke softly, her voice full of reflection. "I never thought I would find peace again," she said, looking out over the plains. "I thought life would always be about running, hiding, surviving, but with you, I feel strong, safe, and alive." Jack squeezed her hand gently. "And I never thought I would find someone like you," he replied. "You've shown me courage, wisdom, and strength I never knew existed. I'm proud to stand by your side." They watched the stars appear one by one in the clear desert sky, each one bright and steady. The world was vast, unpredictable, and sometimes harsh, but they had found harmony together. Their love had been forged through struggle and triumph, trust and understanding, and the shared experience of surviving against the odds. It was a love that neither time nor danger could diminish. In the weeks that followed, Jack and Kaya continued to thrive together. They tended to their land, helped neighbors when needed, and explored the surrounding plains, always side by side. Their home became a sanctuary, not just for themselves, but for anyone in need of help or guidance. Travelers and settlers who passed through spoke of the pair with admiration, marveling at their courage, skill, and unity. Stories spread of the cowboy who had saved a fierce Apache woman, and the woman who had risen from near death to become his equal, partner, and love. Even as they faced the challenges of the Wild West, Jack and Kaya's bond remained unbroken. Storms, wild animals, and occasional bandits tested them, but each obstacle only strengthened their connection. They communicated with quiet glances, gestures, and words when needed, trusting each other instinctively. Their love was no longer fragile or uncertain. It was a force, grounding them and giving them courage to face whatever the future held. One quiet evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Jack and Kaya sat by the river that ran near their cabin. Kaya leaned against Jack, feeling the comfort of his presence and the security of his love. Jack looked down at her, marveling at how far she had come, from a woman barely clinging to life to a strong, confident, and fierce partner who had reclaimed her place in the world. He knew that their story, though born of hardship, was now one of hope, love, and triumph. Kaya lifted her head, looking into Jack's eyes with a mixture of affection, admiration, and something deeper, a fierce, unwavering love. "We've come a long way," she said softly. Jack nodded, holding her close. "Yes, we have, and whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As night fell, the stars glittering like diamonds above the plains, Jack and Kaya felt a profound sense of peace. Their journey had been difficult, filled with pain, danger, and uncertainty, but it had also been filled with courage, resilience, and love. They had survived, grown, and discovered a bond that was unbreakable. The Wild West, with all its challenges and beauty, had shaped them, but it had not broken them. Together, they had risen stronger than ever. Jack and Kaya's story became a quiet legend across the plains, a tale of survival, trust, and a love that defied danger and circumstance. Travelers and neighbors spoke in hushed tones of the cowboy and the fierce Apache woman who had faced death and hardship, only to rise stronger together. They were a symbol of courage, respect, and the transformative power of love, the kind of love that could endure any trial and flourish even in the harshest of lands. And so, life continued. Jack and Kaya built a home filled with warmth, laughter, and courage. They faced the challenges of the Wild West side by side, their partnership unshakable, their love fierce and enduring. They had found harmony in a world that was often harsh and unpredictable, creating a life together that was full of hope, trust, and deep connection. Their story, once born of survival and struggle, had blossomed into a tale of love, resilience, and triumph, a true testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of love that rises against all odds.